Good evening, all. Thank you all so much for coming. This is a very unusual gathering for the new club, a spiritual gathering, and we're very fortunate to have all those many friends of Charlie and mine here. And I want to just explain that Charlie and I met for the first time exactly 45 years ago when he cut my hair, and we became great chums. I went to the wedding of India and Joshua, and we have always been very special friends. Then, just over a year ago, I met Satish Modi, and Satish had the same effect on me when I first met Charlie. And when I then heard that he was coming up to Edinburgh, I thought the two of them should get together and give us a talk. So that is why we are here tonight. I'm really grateful for you all coming. I left on your seat a little thing about combat stress, and I would love you to support that very good cause. But before we start, I'm going to ask Morgan Carberry, who came all the way from the United States, California, and to study here in in Britain, and now she is a great singer, having been an IT guru. Anyway, here she is. She will start off, and then we will hand over to Bishop Brian Smith, recently retired Bishop of Edinburgh. So we'll talk for about 40 minutes, and then there is 20 minutes that you could all ask questions to the speakers. Morgan, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Peter. Ooh. Hello, everyone. It's a great privilege and an honor to be here with such a distinguished panel. I've had the joy of singing for Peter several times before, and he asked me if I could just do a brief song to perhaps give us a contemplative mood before we begin this spiritual discussion. Now, I think both Satish and Charlie, from what I understand, believe that music is a great window into the soul, and I certainly am of a like mind. So this song needs no introduction. It's one of the most sacred pieces of music ever written, and I'm sure that you will all recognize it.
Anyway, Morgan, thank you very much for that song, and Peter, thank you for your introduction. I mean, my role is to chair a discussion, and I haven't a clue how the discussion is going to go, what Satish is going to say, what Charlie is going to say. And I'm conscious that I think in the invitations that went out to come, people got rough CVs of Satish and Charlie. So one can begin the discussion by saying, in typical Edinburgh way, you've had your CVs. But in a sense, just to set the scene, Charlie will be known to people who live in Edinburgh, a man whose hairdressing business has international reputation, and someone who takes a very active interest in interfaith issues in and around the city, and engages with the City Council in matters of what a good society should be like. And Charlie goes out of his way often to describe himself as a spiritual nomad, a spiritual path that included things like St Michael's Church in Hill Square, one of the Scottish Episcopal Church's very high churches, influenced by Buddhism, and found himself going all over the world in his spiritual journey. And most recently, I think, cutting Tom Farmer's hair at the North Pole, which I'm sure he would sort of be willing to repeat for anyone who wished to take him there. But Charlie is a person of many parts, and we'll look forward to hearing his perspective on the spiritual journey. Satish, of course, comes from India. His father was the founder of the Modi group of industries, involved in textiles, chemicals, medicine, telecommunication. I could go on listing the number of interests Satish has, and airlines, having just relaunched the Modi airline as SpiceJet, that is it, nothing to do with the Spice Girls. They travel by taxi, as we all know. But he's someone who is very well interested in philanthropy, particularly in education and arts charities, honoured by many national governments and international bodies. And for him, a religious and spiritual perspective is very important in his life as a philanthropist, his life as a financier, his life as an industrialist. And I think for many people in this room, probably, who may be familiar with his book, In Love with Death, this book captures much of what Satish understands by the spiritual journey. And it's a funny book if you go to, I don't mean a laugh a minute, sort of, if you go to, as it were, it on the website, you'll see that you have to fill in your name and the date of your death. Now, some of you will be thinking, wait a minute, if I'm looking at the website, the date of my death hasn't yet arrived. But to estimate when you think your death will be, because mapping the path between now and that date, not looking at what things have been, but looking at that path between now and one's death, is a key in establishing oneself on a spiritual path where one can gain some measure of spiritual integrity and ensure that one's life is one in which one accomplishes what one has to do. And Satish, this perspective on the spiritual journey that you express in your book, and has that very interesting and enigmatic beginning, I know came to you through an encounter with a Japanese Zen teacher, and I think it may be very interesting for people to hear about that particular encounter, if you'd like to set the ball rolling with that.
Well, friends, first of all, I must thank you all, and especially thank my friend Peter, with whose courtesy I am here, sitting in front of such a galaxy crowd. Thank you so much for your kind words. Well, as it happened in 2004, a team of 30 Japanese industrialists came to India with the Japanese Prime Minister. And with them came the Japanese guru or spiritual leader with some 20 million followers. As you know, Japan is a Buddhist country, and she was a Buddhist, you can say, like a pope. And what happened was something incredible that, you know, first of all, Japanese names are like who's who, Toshiba, Toyota, Sony, Hitachi, you name it, they're household names. And they want to be always together. That's their way of working. So Rahul Gandhi, who's Rajiv Gandhi's son, wanted to call on them, and they were very flux because the entire hotel was full all the rooms were taken up, including the banquet halls. So I knew the president of Hitachi, Mr. Funikawa, at that time. So he called me up and he said, Mr. Modi, Modi-san, we are in a fix. I said, what happened? He said, can't find a hall. I said, then meet in a suite. He said, no, we want to be all together. So I said, let me try. So I called up the hotel and told them to clear one of the restaurants because the banquet halls were all taken up. So finally they had their meeting and then they wanted to pay the bill. So the manager told them that this was a special arrangement done by Mr. Modi, so he's taken care of the bill, so you can't pay. And that was really, the Japanese get very flustered that they enjoyed the hospitality of a man they never met, and now what to do? So then this president of Hitachi called me up to come, possibly, and I was in Delhi, luckily, so I went. And that was a truly remarkable experience that you are in the midst of 30 top leaders of Japan, business leaders. And this lady suddenly, as she saw me, she started crying and tears were rolling down her eyes. So I was quite astounded. And she was 94 at that point. So she took my hands in her hands and then she started caressing them. And she talked in Japanese something which I was quite surprised that she was telling them that I know this man from previous life. So at a moment, and then translated to me, I was thinking, oh my God, she's lost it. I mean, she's at 94. And she's saying, I've known him from previous life, so I didn't want to be rude or anything because I had no feeling of that kind. So the matters passed by and they invited me to come back to Japan, which I never did because I was, as you're told, I was launching my airline, relaunching rather. But finally, after so many messages, she announced in the diary, then I did go. And I was treated really like a head of the state. The Princess of Japan had a reception for me, of course, courtesy. Her name was Nakanishi. And also at the Gokokuji temple, I was given a shogun ceremony, and it was all done with great style in Japan. Instructions were that Mr. Modi's purse will not open. So I was given a black limousine and the suites and everything, the works. Then I went to Kyoto, and till then I had no realization that, I personally didn't realize that what she was saying was true. But then she took me to the chapel above her very small house, and there was a Buddhist chapel on top. And she said, we'll go up there and pray together, which we did. We came down. And then again, she took my hand in her hands, and then again, she started crying. So I said that this woman must be having something, extraordinary situation, that she knows me from previous life. What can I say? But it did touch a chord in my heart that she is not lying at the age of 94, and she means it when she says all that. And then when this thought occurs to you that you meet somebody on a higher plateau, which she was, being a religious leader, and I'm just a businessman. So she's telling the truth. So then it occurred to me that what is this life all about? What are we here? Why are we here? What is this idea of this life? And then I thought about writing this book, In Love with Death. Because I said death is our true destiny. Life is going to betray us one day, and we have to go in the arms of death. So why should we be afraid of death? We should be in love with death, because death can only take us to a better life. When I say life, I don't know what life we'll have, whether it will be heaven, hell, rebirth. This is, I think, a question mark which God has left for us, which we don't know. But one thing is there, we are born to die, we are bound to die, we cannot be here forever. And those of us who can understand this will have more meaningful life, because it solves a lot of problems we have. Losing something, well, at death also you lose. So if you concentrate on death, a lot of the riddles, at least I found, were resolved. And of course, as we go along the evening, I can share more.
Perhaps just it might be worth just amplifying that one little bit, because I know you have in your writings and things you've said likened the human person as they approach death, almost like the hardware of the computer onto which you've got to program a life by the decisions you make, by the actions you make, and that program almost might actually be able to be embedded in some different hardware at a future date. I mean, I wonder if you want to comment
Yes,
on that.
what I want to say is that, you see, there's a play called Whose Life It Is Anyway. So it's every individual's life is his own. And he's the master of his destiny, he or she. When I say he, I don't mean only man. He or she is the master of their ceremony. So what I want to say is that nobody should be able to cast a finger whether you are doing the right thing or wrong thing. It is you who is responsible for your actions. It is you who should know whether your actions are right or wrong. Given a situation, you act in a way which others may think you are doing a wrong thing, but in your heart you know what is the right thing. So all I am trying to say is that as you live a life, all your actions are, so to say, recorded on your own soul as a chip, which when you die, obviously is given into some kind of a supercomputer, you may say, or whatever, which then guides your afterlife. So death is a transit. Death is not the end. That's what I'm trying to say. Death is not the end, it's a transit point. And I'm sure that this is not the ultimate kingdom of God. I'm sure there are better kingdoms God has created, and we should be entitled to taste even that. But whatever we have in this life also we should be grateful. We are blessed people to be sitting here and having this great life, and we should always look to the glass half full, which is enough. The word is enough, rather than the empty glass which we are craving for.
I mean, Satish, you've sort of very eloquently said how one's spiritual vision has a single focus, death, and leading up to it, as it were, helps us structure the life we live. Charlie, you have a slightly different perspective, don't you? I mean, whereas if I say that Satish has this single focus, you find great insight in the writings of Ken Wilber, the American philosopher, psychologist, sort of man of many parts. But what is at the heart of his view, of course, and I've heard you expound this, is holding together a large number of facets, so that we don't just concentrate, say, in life on things we might do in society, making the city a better place. We also have to concentrate on matters of meaning and significance in our lives. And I know you found Ken Wilber and this multifaceted and integrated perspective where many things come together as a key in spiritual life. And so you can see I'm sort of artificially trying to polarize the discussion, a single focus over many foci. And I wonder whether you'd like to sort of amplify that a little bit for us.
Well, if I could come back just a little bit onto my, as I say, I'm a spiritual nomad. I was on television with a minister, and he was interviewing me, and he said, "Charlie, so you're a churchgoer?" And I thought, "Oh gosh, I've not been to church for quite a while." And he said, and I said, "Well," I said, "What am I?" And he says, "Well, what are you then?" I says, "No, I don't go to church." I thought, "Gosh, what am I?" I thought, and this is what came to my mind, was I'm a spiritual nomad. And it has described the way that I've gone about my spiritual journey. And that when I was a boy, for instance, I went around, I was nomadic in the Christian churches, because there weren't the things to do in those days that there is now for a young person. I used to live beside the hill over there in a street called Arthur Street, which was the slums of Edinburgh, and I grew up through there, meandering through the various churches, from the Salvation Army to St. Michael's. Yes, I was an altar boy in that, because you got to hold the candle and walk down the aisle and that. So you got into all these kind of things, and so there was the beginning of that that journey started then, you know, with the Christian teachings, and that really influenced me then and influences me now. But then when I became, when I was 14, I've got a great uncle, and he gave me a book, and it was an Indian book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is like one of the Indian Bibles, you know. And I didn't really understand it that well, but it was hard to read at 14 years old. But something in it clicked, you know, and it stayed with me. And then when I became, when I got into my hairdressing, and I just loved doing the job that I do. I was very fortunate. And but when I was 22, I met a chap who I was cutting his hair, and he told me he was looking into yoga, and how he was looking for a teacher and he couldn't find one, and his friend was looking for one as well, and the both of them got into it. So I searched for a teacher for them. There was no yoga teachers in those times. And so I searched around, and I came across this ballet dancer, this a client of mine, and I thought, I wonder if these ballet dancers know anything about yoga. And eventually this chap came in, and cutting a longer story short, here enough was the guy that knew about yoga, taught these two great guys, and that's what started the yoga in Scotland now. So I do have a great Indian connection, believe me, Satish, and so that grew. If you made a tree of yoga in Scotland, that was the bit that you usually see at the top point, and it grew from there. A lot of yoga teachers don't know that story, but it's true. And the Scottish School of Yoga started up then. So that was the kind of way that this all sort of unfolded for me. And then, so I looked at that at that point. That's when India really did influence me greatly, and the teachings of the Indians. And it's interesting, listen to Satish, that it took a Japanese person to get with all these rich teachings from India, the fantastic stuff. But he had to wait till, as you know, as my mother used to say, God unfolds his miracles in wondrous ways, in different ways. And so here's Satish finding out in 2004, he meets this wonderful Japanese lady that awakened him, spiritually awakened him. And my journey was a completely different thing, of this meandering nomad looking into various religious teachings and teachers. And I had the great privilege, I'm going to get to Ken Wilber in a minute, and so I had the great privilege, I just want to put Ken Wilber into a bit of context, but I had the great privilege of meeting a lot of really great teachers. And I also was very blessed to have an ability to check out somebody quickly and know that they weren't right for me, or that there was something not quite developed about them, or they were off the rails a bit in some way. And so I never got caught up with any daft teachers. They were all great people, you know, and I learned so much along my way. And so the Buddhist teacher, first of all, the Indian teachers, the Indian yogis, and still to this day, if anyone hasn't looked into the Indian yogis, have a look at what these people taught. Wonderful, wonderful teachers, you know, and spiritual values, and ways, different paths to God, as they would say. And then I was introduced to the Buddhists, and the Buddhists have played a big part. People will often say to me, Charlie, you're a Buddhist, and I'm quite honoured to say yes, but I'm actually really a nothing. I usually say I'm not an anything. I'm this nomadic, spiritual, philosophical roamer that roams around looking into things. And so it's not. It hasn't. My journey hasn't has developed in a meandering but very focused meandering way. It's been consistent from when I was a boy right up to this day. And then, so throughout meeting people like the Dalai Lama, Satish is telling a story, so I'll equalise with a little story that I love. That when we went out with Tom Farmer's been mentioned already, but it was Tom that actually took us to India. He said, would you like to come to India? We said yes, and Tom took us to India, and away we went. And we went and met the Dalai Lama, and when we were sitting there, he said, we were talking, and my friend Victor had some business to do with him. And so once that was over, Victor just said, see that the conversation was starting to lighten up a bit. And he started asking me about hairdressing. And I said, Your Holiness, I says, you need a haircut. His hair was about that length. And he says, I'm going to do it tonight. And he's like that. And I said, I gave you a clipper about 15 years ago. I mean, I thought you wouldn't remember. He says, is it a 220? And I had bought him a 220 so that it would go around the globe with him, you know. And he says, I still use it. So, and so these lovely little happenings that happened along the journey were, have been wonderful, and they really touch you and really support you. Sounds like a little funny story, but you know there's that connection that you have. So anyway, the story went on through the years, and as I say, I've always thought of myself as I'm not an anything, and I never wanted to be a something. I didn't want to have a label, and it wasn't a rejection of anything, because I really embrace. I'm all religion embracing. I really mean that, and also atheist embracing as well. I have no problem with somebody who doesn't see it that way. But on the other hand, my own impulse is and I don't mean that as impulsive, but it's a feeling of something in me driving me to find out more. And so along my journey through Buddhism and you name the religion, I looked into it. Although with the Muslim religion, it was the Sufis, it was always the mystical ones that I was interested in, the mystical side of each of the religions. Same with Christianity, it was the mystical side that appealed to me. And so I would look out the mystics and the saints and so on. But then I got up to about 20 years ago in a Buddhist magazine I was reading, I came across Ken Wilber, the work of Ken Wilber. And Ken Wilber's an American sort of genius character who has in the 100 years ago, an Indian called Sri Aurobindo, came up with a philosophy that he called integral. And there was a German who came up. They say that the wheel was invented 4 places in the world at the same time, but a bit like that, integral started to pop up here and there. And to this day, there's not a lot of people that know what integral is. And so I was thinking about Satish, and I thought, now Satish is a great man for meeting other business people and joining up with them and developing businesses, so they join, you see. So I'm hoping that what I share with Satish tonight, that somewhere along the line he's going to join with it, because I really, really honestly believe there's even more in it than he has wonderfully come up with so far. And he is wonderful. That's a wonderful book, by the way. It really is. I'm not just saying that. I read 75 pages of it on the website, and it's fantastic. Don't be scared of it because it says in love with death. Oh, no, it's really positive. It's fantastic. So anyway, the work of Ken Wilber introduced me into a new way of looking at things, a new perspective. And it's like if Satish, as they say about the ancient saying about there's many ways up the mountain, and Satish's way is up one part of the mountain and mine's is up another. But I feel I can wave to him and say hello, Satish, and feel friendly with him and embracing to what he sees. There's nothing in the way that I look at it that is against or it's wrong. There's nothing wrong in my philosophy. It's like everybody's right because everybody's evolving and working from the very best place they can come from, right here, right now, always. And that looking at things from an evolutionary point of view, that we, as well as evolution having developed, as Darwin says, we also evolve as human beings. We've evolved from things that didn't even know what a tree was, and then figuring it out, and then it went on and on and on over these massive amount of years. And here we are all sitting here, having evolved and still evolving. And so it's the evolving of our consciousness that really, really interests me. And that's where the difference comes in to Satish's position, because Satish has got a beautiful thing worked out, which is great. He wouldn't need to do any more than he's done, by the way. He's fantastic. However, it just so happens that the way that I see it is that our consciousness evolves if we get the chance. And the work of Wilber, he's got an integral. We're all familiar with the word integral, but the way that he uses it is different. So it's not integrating two things together. It's recognizing that this whole life, every single thing, in the universe is integrated. Everything's connected in some way or another. And so the word integral is referring to that. Then he looks at things in a way that he sees that always, at all times, that we have got our own inner life going. And always we have our own, the collective life. That right now, this is a real collection going on, and that is happening. There is also always a material life going on for us. And there's also always the systems that make that material life work. And so he puts it into a quadrant that he calls it the I, and then the we, and the it, and the its. And then he goes on, I'll give you an easier one than that, because I'll park that, because it's quite difficult. It took me ages to understand that, by the way, but I just wouldn't give up, because I knew that he was onto something. So, if you think about, I went to a thing up in the council. How am I doing time-wise, by the way?
You're using it up fine.
I went to a thing in the council, and it was a civic cafe, and it was about finding a well-being indicator for Edinburgh. And I was sitting there a bit puzzled about what a well-being indicator was. And then I started to see that the things that were coming up were mostly things to do with our material side of life, housing, or very good education, all good things. But then there was nothing coming up that was to do with our spiritual life, about our inner life. And so I brought it to their attention, and I gave them a model. And I said, if you have a model, if you consider that you have meaning in everything, always, it's like once you start looking into social difficulties, it's easy to forget meaning and bring inner life into it. And so I pointed out to them that they had to include that. And to simplify a huge thing, don't think that I'm anywhere near getting at Wilbur, by the way, because Wilbur is really huge, and I'm simplifying a little bit of it to let you see that you couldn't. There were people sitting in the audience, and I could see that they were not including meaning. They were including all the good things about looking after people, but there was no meaning coming up in the story. So I had to put my hand up and say and point out to them that meaning was necessary in the picture, and that we had to have consider that the inner life was very important, and it had to be looked after, and we had to find ways of doing that would help Edinburgh, because you could put all the new housing you like in Edinburgh, but it wouldn't make people happy if they don't have a way of finding an approach to their inner life. And so it's bringing the inner life into focus that is really, really important. I think I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Chuck. I mean, one thing that has just struck me, hearing the two perspectives given, is that, and this is perhaps ultra-simplifying Satish's work, his industrial empire, has many facets to it, from textiles to airlines, and the spirituality has this single focus: you concentrate on death. Charlie's work and empire has this single focus of sort of hairdressing and the art of hairdressing, and the spirituality has these many facets to it, and to make sure that all of them are sort of integrated together. But one thing that is sort of true of both is that one's work and one's spirituality does get involved with money. And now, Satish, you have said on the past, and I saw you say it on YouTube, because I looked at YouTube just to see what sort of person I'd be meeting this evening, that wealth is not God, but wealth is not less than God. Now, that could be quite a provocative remark, and I don't know whether you would want to unpack how wealth impacts on the spirituality that I've outlined. And just
well, what I'm saying there is that, you see, money is like energy. You can see money, you can feel money, you can use money. If you have money, you can go and buy things, you can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can buy a private jet, you can buy a business. But when I say money is not less than God, means in this world which has been created, money has a tremendous power. that you can go and buy things. It's transparent. We can feel it. We can use it. However, it comes with a baggage. I was born in a very wealthy family, and the family has grown more wealthy. The baggage it comes with, that it makes you lonely, it makes you not able to give love, take love. It doesn't make you happy. It is, you cannot bond. If you are very rich, you feel people are your friends because you have money and they want something out of you in the end, which makes you very sad. So, it is definitely not God. Firstly. Secondly, you must remember one thing. Although we are all born unequally, somebody is born to prince, as a prince, somebody is born as a pauper, somebody is born with a disease, somebody is born as whatever families we are born in, and even in the same family, the siblings are not the same. But death is a great equalizer. At death, we are all 3 kg of dust. You see, now I know a very rich man, just if I can be permitted. He gave $100 million. He had a liquor empire in India, and his sons were in his 70s. He gave $100 million to his younger son, and he gave $200 million to his elder son. As in India, like here, the practice is elder one gets more. The younger one was very unhappy because he got less, he got half. And everybody I know in the society would say, oh, poor so-and-so, oh, poor so-and-so, you got only half, you got only half. And this man cannot be consoled. He was a good friend of mine, so we were sitting at a dinner table. I said, what's wrong? Why, you have got $100 million, you have got a house, you have got a car, you have got a good life, you have wife, children. He said, but my brother got double than I got. I said, I've got a perfect formula for you if you want to hear it. He said, tell me. I said, at death he will lose 200 and you will lose 100. And I am telling you, he was totally consoled. All the jealousy was finished and he was a happy man. So, we need not be jealous of anybody, because ultimately when I say focus on death, we are here for few years. So let's enjoy our life, and that focus gives you a tremendous energy. Now, if I look at myself, I am here for 2 days to your great city of Edinburgh. I am totally in love with. I am enjoying every moment because I know I have a flight to take tomorrow. And I'll be leaving this great city of yours, which I want to enjoy every moment. Same with life. You are here for few years. Why are you getting yourself entangled in all the bad things that are going on in this world, which you are going to leave in any case? So, if you take that wisdom with you, that you are here for a few years, you will start enjoying life, rather than see all the ills and all the problems you are facing and everything that goes on with it.
Could we inject the notion of philanthropy into the discussion? Because that is something that many people associate both of you with in your life and the way you handle wealth. And when we were just idly chatting, I mean, I referred to that oft slightly misquoted remark of Andrew Carnegie, the man who dies rich dies disgraced, because in some sense he hasn't put the money to as big a use as possible. I mean, would you agree with that remark of Carnegie? Charlie, would you?
Not necessarily.
No.
No. I mean, yes, it could be like that, but I mean, I think you could die rich and still be a good person. I think that Satish will probably die rich, and he is a very good person. So, I think I can see his point, obviously, yeah. But no, I think it could be the other way around as well.
No, well, I think what you say when you say rich is that you have a huge responsibility to society. Your wealth comes from the money you have invested in businesses, and those businesses are important because they create employment, you have to pay taxes, and as an entrepreneur, it is your job to create businesses. Like when I started the first offshore fund with JP Morgan Chase in India, I mean, India had only 2 weeks foreign exchange left in 1992, and we brought $500 million into India. So unless you have that wisdom to go out and meet people and persuade them, so I think doing business is not a bad thing, but what Carnegie said is true, because you cannot be calling yourself as an owner. You are a trustee. There's a big difference between the two. That money which you have generated, or that money is in the system, if you start feeling that it belongs to you, then definitely you die in disgrace. But if you are a trustee of that money, and that money should be put to good use, for instance, talking of philanthropy, like I run 3-4, like we give 4,000 children totally free education in various trusts of ours, and then I run another charity with my daughter. 300 street children in Calcutta are given free education. Then we are running a Stitch in Time program, because I found that the women, supposing they lose money, or they lose, supposing their husband, or they have no means to earn, and I'm sorry to say, at least in our part of the world, she's subject to sexual violence, which makes her very vulnerable. And a young woman, no means of earning, the whole world is your enemy. So the Stitch in Time helps women to resurrect themselves by giving them a way to earn money, to teach them how to do it, and also give them, in the end, some sewing machine or some hardware to get on with life. And now we have set up Arts for India, which is a charity with Princess Trust. I have set up and registered in England to create a universe of art, and also to give 100 children, make them into artists. Because why we are doing, emphasizing on education and self-support is that I say, if you give somebody who's hungry a fish, he will get over the evening. But if you give him a fishing rod, as the saying is, he can get on with life. So you must give him that feeling of being able to earn money, not just a decent earning. That is why the whole program which we are running to help thousands of people, which we are able to do only because we have money. If we have no money, we can't do it. But having said that, otherwise, you'll go in a deep depression also, my dear friend, that if you are in your 70s, as I am now 66, and I put my death date, because my father died at 74. So I have 8 more Christmas to go through. So I'll be dying also at 74, I presume, maybe 75. But at the same time, I'll go in a depression. I'll think, oh my gosh, I've got so many few years left and I've got all this wealth, and it will all evaporate. No, I don't own it. I'm here for a few more years, then I'll be going on a journey. So it is important that whatever I can do in these 8-9 years left to do for the welfare of mankind, humanity, I must do. And that's the feeling I have. So I'm not disagreeing with his words, but his words have to be taken in the right perspective. That's what I say.
And I think it is fair to say I slightly misquoted him, but that's just like money is the root of all evil, the love of money is the root of all. So you're right to respond in that way. I think before we just throw things open so that people can have questions to Charlie and Satish, I mean, there's just one thing I would quite like just to hear Satish respond on, because having been in Edinburgh a couple of days and knowing the Scottish culture and knowing the significance of Edinburgh as a financial centre, etc., and knowing that people say the culture of our financial institutions often leaves much to be desired. What's your perspective on the financial industrial situation of Scotland, coming in from India as a person who understands these things from a different perspective?
Well, let me rewind a little bit and let me say, if you take history and if you see till 1750, okay, let's go from 1 AD, like when Jesus was born, till 1750. If you go and read, in 1750, India was the richest country in the world. It had a GDP of $89 billion, whereas UK was 10 and USA was 0.5. And if you see, the entire Europe was only 50, and that's all on the net. So you have done very well in the past 200 years, from 1750 till 1950, where the entire UK became a big power to reckon with, and you have, let's say, among the top 10 countries in the world. Now, everything is integrated now. Who could have said that a small country like Greece can play havoc with the whole world, consisting of only 9 million people? But every day we read, oh, Greek economy is playing havoc with us. So I would say that if you take Scotland, which is a great country, and I have many Scottish friends, including Peter now, and all of you, you have a fantastic future. But at the same time, you have to be aware of that you are not only responsible for your actions, but you are in an integrated world. So if a calamity is happening in Greece, then your economy is affected. If tomorrow something happens in China, you are affected. If day after tomorrow something happens in India, you are affected. Same way India is affected with other sections. So I think if you look at the financial and you see Scotland, as you have pointed out, I am right now at Edinburgh, and I would say that the future is very glorious, not glorious, very glorious. I believe in it. But the personal future, the personal happiness is at stake. If you are more wealthy, doesn't mean you are more happy. That's the difference. I would say the first thing I would say to the Western societies where I have differed, I was at Lugano, and I was a speaker in Lugano invited by the Swiss government. And one thing I say to people, that be faithful to your children, to your wives, to your husbands, because you have such a glorious life. And I sad to see that 1 in 2 marriages collapse, the children are affected, the lives are affected. People think, oh, we are now more wise, we can lead a better life. It doesn't work like that. You know, you have to have more tolerance. So I would say, don't judge happiness with wealth. It goes in an inverse proportion. And just now you were rousing one of your lady from Tetra Pak Empire said, and I liked her words, she would have £4.8 billion empire, that when wealth comes, happiness goes through the other door. So these are my words.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to bring another little dimension to the conversation. That Satish has got this wonderful. He's got the twin gifts that I think is that he has the ability to create the wealth, and the good heart to share it. And so in my world, it's a little smaller than that, but nevertheless, it's very active. And one of the areas that we're very active in, and that is our values and the way that we teach our young people and how we share with our clients, so that our clients are treated in a way that they can hopefully go away not just with a good haircut, but with having been treated in a way that it uplifts them. And this is what we teach them. We teach them just to write down to 3 words. And one is to be genuine. So when I say to our young people, that when you're being genuine in this perspective, it means that you really know how to do your job. You really know how to do what the client's going to need. So when they sit in your chair, you know how to do it. You've done your homework, you've trained, and so you genuinely can say, how would you like your hair? And you're going to be able to do it. Then you can be very good at that, but then you also need to have empathy. So you have to be able to read what the other person, what the client needs. So you never project onto them what you could do, because you might be able to do a lot of wonderful things, but what is the haircut that they need? What is the hairstyle that they need? And so to have the empathy to read the person. And then you could be very good at the genuineness, you could be very good at the empathy, but then you could deliver it coldly. And I say you have to have warmth. You have to have a warmth that is not invasive with the person, that it's not possessive, it's not manipulating them, and that they feel really at comfort. So we teach them to be genuine, to have empathy, and non-invasive warmth, a supportive warmth.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you. I think at this stage we'll change gear and there might be comments to be had and questions to Charlie, to Satish from the floor on anything that's been said or anything else. I think as a clergyman in the Scottish Episcopal Church, I mean, the values that Charlie just enunciated of genuineness, empathy and warmth could be very useful in devising a training program for clergy as well as persons in disability.
You could take it anywhere, actually, in life. Yeah.
So, any comments either to Charlie or Satish? There we are in the front row. Wait for the microphone. There's a microphone coming.
First, I'd like to say that I have great respect for the stories you've told us about your spiritual path. But as someone who's really not very clever with anything to do with money or business, but feel like a victim of modernity to some extent, I'd really like to ask you, in terms of modernization, especially in India, where, as the money comes in, then the ways of life which people have been able to maintain traditionally for the happiness of their families and their communities, but also the systems which are alienating to people, where instead of speaking to a person, you speak to a machine, this kind of thing. Have you been able to do anything to harmonize, to ameliorate the damage to human relationships, which this side of modernization does?
Satish, a brief response to that, if you would. Thank you.
Well, it's very difficult. It's a very valid question and very difficult to answer. But one thing I will say very, very quickly is that India, whether it's Indians or whether British or Americans, we are all human beings. And the real, let's say, happiness or the real value lies in the love and family life. And you are so right that as modernization happens, as more wealth comes in, out goes of the window all these values. Like previously we used to say in India, when you marry someone, you marry for 7 lives. Now you don't know whether you're in the first life or you're in the 7th life. But you're married for good. And you cannot even think of a divorce. But nowadays people are more wise, they want to have a better life, they want to have God knows what they are looking for. I have seen one thing which I am sorry to share with all of you, coming from a very rich background, that as wealth goes up, the age of the women they marry goes down, and which is very sick to my mind. So they should marry for love, not for money and youth. We say that first you want Maya, means first you want wealth, and then you want Kaya. That means you want a young woman. And that is not correct. You should be more harmonious with your partner and more, understanding what's going on. Because ultimately you are the one who will suffer.
Any other point? There's someone in the back. Right.
Could you say something about, we all agree that we're fortunate to be here this evening, and we probably all agree that we're very fortunate to be on this incredibly fast journey on Earth, but a lot of us, the later years of our time on Earth are very, very unhappy, because so many of us get dementia and are lonely, and as you get older, you begin to fear aging, because you fear what may happen. I wonder if either of you has anything to say about the nature of the human condition.
Well, that's a very difficult territory, and the only thing that I could bring to that, Sheena, is that if you live a life that has got good meaning in it, and you build your inner character, that if it comes like that, if, for instance, if I got dementia in my later life, I would hope that I would have a way of embracing it instead of falling apart with it. And so having a way of looking at life, of being grateful for life, and then living dangerously and even being grateful for difficult things is the way that I look at how I would approach the difficult times in life. That so during my life up to now, that when things have been difficult, once I've got through it, I've turned gratefulness towards it in myself, and so that there's gratefulness. That gratefulness has built a strength in me, and so it could be quite possible that one day I'll have to cope with that myself, and I've got a pretty bad memory at the moment, for starters, and no, I'm okay, but I do think that that's the way that I've dealt with it anyway, and that is to be grateful as much as possible for life and what happens. And I am grateful, I can assure you. I've practiced gratefulness all my life, and even with difficult things. It gives you a strength that helps you.
I would like to say something.
Satish, right to comment, and then we'll have time for one more comment from the floor, and then we'll got to wind up. Satish.
Well, what you say is absolutely right. Old age looks like a curse because your body doesn't work and loneliness sets in, and what you want to have, you can't have. So what you say is right. I mean, it does look very bad. But what I have to say is that don't look to your family for company. Don't look to your children for company, and you should be fine. Because there is enough people out there who are also lonely. If you reach out to them, you will be surprised that how good life can be. The problem we have is that because we are so attached to family, so attached to our own children or whatever, and we want their time and they want to get on with their life, and this whole tussle is going on, and you say that, okay, I'm in the hospital or I'm lonely, why can't I have more time? And they say, okay, it's our youth, why can't we? So there is always a contradiction. So I would suggest that if you reach out to people, I mean, loneliness is the biggest curse, I agree, and you have to tackle it by reaching out to people. That's all I have to say.
I think it reminds me of that episode I've sometimes referred to I think people remember the film Peter's Friends, where someone comments that the truly brave and courageous person nowadays is not the person who scales Everest single-handed or rows single-handed across the Pacific, but the truly courageous person is the one who leaps over the garden fence and tries to get to know their neighbour. And that's where courage for developing life today lies. But lady there with the microphone, yes. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Eric Askland. I was struck by the contrast when Charlie was mentioning his visit to the council, and he was reminding them that life and meaning isn't necessarily brought about by housing and education and all those fine things. And it reminded me of a trip that I took to India recently, where I was in Rajasthan and was seeing out in the Thar Desert how so many people were kind of living in mud huts and had no running water, and yet, you know, the women wore beautiful saris, and it was such, but the contrast was so strong. And I was interested to hear about how your, Satish particularly, are investing in charitable projects that are helping to raise the expectations and perhaps skills of the people, the poor in India. And is it ever something that you think might be on an equivalent level?
We'll have one brief comment from each, and then we'll wind up.
Well, it's a very ticklish question, but let me say one thing. We did a study as a corporate, and we have found out that there'll be more poor people on this planet. There'll be in 2100 than they are in 2000. So, in other words, poverty will continue to rise, and there is nothing any particular one person can do about it. So, while I totally agree with what you say about Rajasthan and about the poor people living there, but the very fact that the population growth is there and the very fact that the poverty will continue to rise. So what our focus is basically is to select few, like I gave you example, like 4,000 children we educate and stitch in time, and 300 street children, and now 100 students. You can only reform that many. You can't do a complete overall of the society. That will be my comment.
Charlie, last word.
I would be more optimistic that things can get better. I think there's a lot of wonderful people in the world. There's a lot of wonderful education. There's wonderful knowledge. There's ways forward to make the world a better place right at hand. as I say, I've looked at so many different ways. There are so many different wonderful paths to go on, and I think that things could get better. And I'd like to see the glasses half full. Rather optimistic person that I am. So that's what I think. It could be great.
Thank you, Charlie. And now, Morgan, you get the very, very last word.
May it be when darkness calls, your heart will be true. You walk a lonely road. Oh, how far you are from home. Morning, you truly believe, and you will find your way. Morning, a promise lives within you now. A promise lives within you now. Thank you.
Well, Morgan, thank you very much indeed for that way of rounding off the evening. And I think it remains for me to thank Satish, thank Charlie very much indeed for coming here this evening, and to thank Peter for facilitating this particular meeting where we have had insight into, as it were, the nature of philanthropy, spirituality in the two very different cultures for Edinburgh and India. So Satish, Charlie, Peter, thank you very much.
But almost the most important person to thank is the former Bishop of Edinburgh. Brian, you did a fantastic job chairing this. It was sensational, and I have enjoyed the evening enormously, and I'm sure everyone else has enjoyed it. I would like to just tell one story. Not so long ago, I was very fortunate to be invited to this amazing lecture that the Dalai Lama gave in Edinburgh in the Usher Hall. And it was quite a most emotional and a most fantastically interesting experience. I loved it. And when he was finished, he was given the wonderful tartan that was developed by Victor Spence, who's here amongst us. And it was a tartan for peace and love. And it is a beautiful tartan, and I am so fortunate, Satish, if you would stand up, that I can pour it over you, or hang it over you, like it was hung over the Dalai Lama. Here we are. Here we are.
Right, that's it. I think that's it, and that'll keep you nice and warm on this nice sunny day. Anyway, thank you.
I want to have a picture. If you could just stand together for a second.